All right, welcome back, everybody. This is season 2 of Lessons from Terrible Students. We took about a month off, so we have decided to call this season 2. We've changed things up a little bit. We'll get into what's changed and what we're doing a little bit different here in just a little bit, but we got to get some things out of the way first. As always, this is a Lumius sponsored podcast. At Lumius, we are your partners in learning. Okay, so welcome back, everybody. Like I said in our intro, this is season 2, and you might notice we have a new, I was going to say new old face, but maybe that's offensive. I don't know.
Thanks, Jeremy.
A new old face that's been with us before. In season 2, we decided to do things a little different. You guys, if you've listened / heard us before, my name is Jeremy. I'm an instructional designer. Last season 1, we had a fellow instructional designer, Dr. Tara. Season 2, we decided to do things a little bit differently. We decided to, instead of having 2 instructional designers talk about instructional design, we did a ton of that last season. We decided to change things up and do an instructional designer and a project manager. So we decided to kind of have a different point of view, different opinion, and more than likely a few more arguments. So we'll see where that goes.
Absolutely.
So we brought Sarah back. Sarah was on our project manager episode before. She can definitely hold her own with me and has in many instances. So it should be a good conversation all around this season. So I'm very, very excited to have her on. And I think she is fantastic at her job and has we have benefited many times over many projects with having her on those different projects. So I'm excited to have her. For those of you that did not join us for season 1, just do some quick reintroductions. Like I said, my name is Jeremy. I'm a senior instructional designer here at Lumius. I have been in the learning and development space since 2014, so roughly about almost 10 years, give or take. I started as kind of a field service technician for a local ISP, kind of fell backwards into the instructional designer space, helping, train field service technicians, moving on to the corporate side throughout my learning and development career. Go back and listen to season 1 if you want more into that. We dive deeper into that through that. Go give us some hits on that if you want to learn more about that. But so I'm going to turn it over to Sarah and kind of let her introduce herself a little more. Sarah, you want to give us kind of the lowdown on what brought you around here?
Absolutely. Thank you. And I just want to say I'm really excited to be doing this season with you as well, Jeremy. And to tell you a little bit about myself, like Jeremy, I kind of got involved in learning and development accidentally, or backed into it, if you will. I started out as a frontline customer service agent many moons ago in 2011, and then became a subject matter expert in my field. And then I partnered with our L&D group quite a bit to do training. And then eventually I just kind of fell into the L&D team. So I've got a little bit of everything. What was that?
That's how it usually happens. We just kind of reach out and grab people. That's I think that's how most of us end up at. We just kind of grab people.
Yeah, most people I know in learning and development stumbled in here as either educators. They started as educators and said, maybe I like the adult learning theory part of educating, or subject matter experts who moved into helping train other people and then developing training for those people. So that's how it happened for me too. So I've got a little bit of the facilitation experience. I did that for a few years, instructional design as well. I am not on a level of instructional design as Jeremy here, but I can throw together a RISE module if I need to. So that journey started probably my L&D journey about 10 years ago. And I moved into the project management space for curriculum development in 2019. So 4 years now. I can't do math. That's not my strong suit. Project management is.
Who needs math?
Uh,
I'm gonna use chat,
uh,
right?
yeah. So that's how I got here at Lumius. I love project managing with our team. We've got such a good close knit team, and like Jeremy said, sometimes we're really good at respecting each other's views and hearing each other out. So I think we're going to have some good conversations here coming.
Yeah, and that's a pretty good transition into what we're talking about today. I didn't do what we're talking about today because I wanted to kind of wait until we got a little deeper into the episode. We mentioned a few times in season 1 about doing an episode about this. We never got around to it. What we're doing today is what we're starting to call corporate hot takes. So this is stuff that we've conversated about and we've talked about multiple times. It's things that come up on LinkedIn and things like that, and things that we've had conversations about, and maybe that we've, I wouldn't say argued about, but have conversations about, and things that we may either agree on or not agree on, depending on which of them. I think a lot of these we may agree on,
For the most part, yeah.
but I think things that come up through LinkedIn articles or New York Times articles, Bloomberg articles, whatever news articles you read, and either to me they sound off, or through experience we see these things being working in the corporate world. I feel like these things come up, so I figured we would do an episode on it. Again, we're kind of moving slightly away. A lot of these still do have to do with either the corporate space or the learning space or something like that. So not completely moving away from that learning space, still kind of right there to it. And a lot of future episodes, we're definitely still going to get in there. But I figure this is a way to kind of get to know our new format, get to know kind of more about myself and more about Sarah as we kind of lean into this new season 2 format. So that being said, let me pull up my list here, and we'll start diving into the first one. So these first few are what I'm going to start calling our pre-onboarding or interview process hot takes. So I'm going to go slightly out of order of our list here, Sarah. So the first one is, let's say you're sitting in an interview, and you're in that interview and you're listening through, and we've both been, I mean, we've been in interviews before, right?
Oh, for sure. Yep.
Years ago or whatever, right? And we're sitting through the interview and we're listening and we go, why we're here, and we're like a family here. We're all a family here. And pre-COVID, I would have heard that differently. Does that make sense? Like pre-2020, I think that would have been a positive to me.
Yeah.
I don't know if I think that would be a red flag to me now because of what I have read.
Yeah.
More of now,
So
if that makes sense.
I can understand why you would say that.
Yeah, and it's weird now because I do, working at Lumius here, I do kind of feel that way now, but I don't know if I would say that in an interview, right? Because I feel like it's a red flag if I were to say that to a prospective employee now, because I think the assumption on the part of the interviewee is, I'm going to expect you to work extra because that's what you would do for family. Like, I think the
Undying loyalty.
Exactly. I think the expectation when the interviewee is hearing that is, I'm going to expect you to go above and beyond for less money in the interview part. Right.
So, yeah.
And
And
I think that's the hot take.
it's funny you say it like that, because I'm just thinking in my head, I can see both sides of this as it being like, that is slightly a red flag, because in my experience, that has been kind of a facade, if you will, of like, we expect your, your loyalty 100%, your, even if you don't have work-life balance, no matter what, what's going on, we're a family. We do it for each other. But I've also worked now at places like Lumius where we really are such a close-knit group of people, and, we know everybody. And my interview process, I spoke with our CEO, like it's awesome. And I just feel
Right.
so comfortable with everybody, and they really are like family. So, um, it's hard to say, but yeah, maybe let people make that kind of decision for themselves, kind of like we have, rather than
Yeah,
saying it
and I
in an
think that's
interview.
the key, right? And I think that's it's rough. Like I think it may not have a place in the interview because I think you're absolutely right. If it's something that your employee should say about their feeling about it, right? But I don't think it has a place in the interview because you're exactly right. I've had people say that about, you know, the loyalty aspect of it. Like let me come to that conclusion on my own
Right.
about it. Like, because I don't know, work life balance is very important to me. Like,
Oh, yeah.
that's one of my big things personally. Like, I value my family time. I value my personal time, and you're absolutely right. Like, Lumius is one of the few companies that I work for that value that time as much as I do. So I would say
Without
we do have
question.
a very family focused environment here, which
For sure.
unfortunately I do feel is kind of rare, depending on where you work. And if you have that type of environment, stick there. It's important. Um, so yeah, I mean it's one of those things. But as I've been reading more, as the workforce itself is changing, as more younger folks start
I
coming
was
in.
just gonna say that, Jeremy. I think it's
Yeah,
also a generational thing, just like we were talking recently about people staying in jobs for
mm,
20, 30 years out of
oh yeah,
loyalty to a company and comfort. And our generation, people coming into corporate America, that is not the case. You got to be
true.
competitive. The company, so I think as that happens, if it's a good company to work for, they're going to be conscious of those things. They're going to care about
That's
work
true.
life balance, right? And so they're probably not going to market it as so much. Maybe it's just an expected. Like, we don't even have to say we're like family here because we're a good company to work for, and we believe in work life balance, and we believe in getting paid for your title and the expectations, and that's it.
You
So
know, that's a good point. If it's, and I'm trying to think back, I don't think anybody at Lumius ever actually said, "Hey, we're like family here." I don't think that was ever actually said in my interview process. I think it was just because you're right. I don't think it ever actually
yeah,
needs to be said. It
I
should
can't
be
remember.
something that's just felt, right? Like I don't.
Yeah.
You shouldn't need to say it.
Now,
Like if it's
it's slightly different. I have, interviewed before for companies where I've spoken with people on the existing team that I would be joining. And
hmm,
I've heard that come from them before as like our team is really close knit. We're like family, just to kind of maybe showcase the culture and the cohesiveness of a team. But that's coming from an existing team member, not an HR recruiter trying to get talent in the door, or a
hmm,
manager, or the hiring manager being like, we're like family. We expect you to
choose the
help like
buzzword.
family.
Choose the buzzword.
Yeah. We spend
That's
late
funny.
nights together and holidays. No, I'm not
Right.
doing that.
We were here on Christmas Eve, guys. It was fun.
Yeah. No, thank you.
Oh, that's funny. All right, so you did touch on something else, and another thing I have on the list. So you touched
Yeah.
on, jumping jobs, and what the term would be like job hopping every couple of years, and I think
Yes.
that's and we were talking about this the other day. So and I'll use my dad as an example. He worked at one plant locally for 20 something years, and when that
Mine too.
manufacturing plant
Yep.
moved shortly after NAFTA was signed. That's for all of you people that didn't take civics in high school, that was the North American Free Trade Agreement signed during the Clinton administration. Um, so that
Jeremy
local plant,
obviously remembers this very well. Yes.
It was a formulative memory in my early high school years. Date myself a little bit. I guess late middle school, early high school. Anyway, so when that was signed, the plant that my father had worked for about 20, 25 years, it figured out that it would be cheaper for that particular plant to close and move its facility to Mexico. He was offered a job at the corporate site in Chicago. One thing, he went up there, interviewed, all that kind of stuff, decided not to uproot his family, move to Chicago. So we ended up staying in North Carolina. But that was the only time that he ever changed jobs. He went to another manufacturing plant that was still was just across the border into South Carolina, but we were already on the border, so we didn't have to move. And stayed there for another 20, 25 years.
So retirement.
Yeah.
Right.
Till retirement. So he only job hopped one time. But nowadays, that's the anomaly, right? Like just staying at one employer for your entire career is, even if you wanted to, almost impossible now, I think. And I think that's my hot take, is I think even if you wanted to stay at one employer for your entire career, which I think there's multiple things saying that that's probably not the best move career-wise. I think it's almost impossible. And I'll use my example to kind of say why that is. And then Sarah, I'll let you go into it. So I came from, like I said, I started as a technician. As a technician, I started making $12.50 an hour in the year. This is in the early aughts, 2007. So, way back in 2007, I started making $12.50 an hour. When I left being a technician, God, what was I making? I was making roughly just at like $21 an hour, I think, getting raises and all that kind of stuff. And I was almost at the ceiling of what I could make as a as a service technician. Now, I could go be a maintenance technician and make more money, or be like a different classified technician and work on different stuff to make more. But as a service in-house technician, I was almost at the ceiling at what I would be able to make. Now, when I was brought in to be a training content specialist, they don't give you what you would make at that position. What they do is they give you an increase based on percentage.
Correct.
Right. So
that's fairly common, actually. Sometimes,
right. So they're not bringing me in at what another normal training content specialist would make, because I'm not an external hire. So they actually had to get approval to give me the percentage increase that they gave me.
Right.
Which still did not bring me up to the minimum of what an external training content specialist would make. Now, let me run that. Let me say that again. So I was the cheapest option for them as a new training content specialist, which I still think, and it was still a positive for me because I was still making more money than I was.
Growth for you.
It still changed my life.
Yep.
Right. Because without that, I would not be where I am now. So I'm still eternally grateful. And it was a good business move for them because I was most definitely cheaper than anybody else that had applied for the position. They knew I was going to work my ass off in that position because of what I was coming from, which was this hourly kind of production focused position, and what I was trying to go towards, which was kind of the corporate position, to do what I was trying to do, which is make my life better. But in the end, had I gotten that position at another company, I would have made more money.
Oh, for
Probably
sure.
wouldn't have gotten that position at another company because I didn't have the experience for that position. But setting that fact aside, they still brought me in at lower than their minimum because they could, because I was an internal hire.
Yep.
So, and again, I stayed at lower. So even when I was brought up to an instructional designer, I was still at lower than what the minimum for an instructional designer was, because I started at lower than what a training content specialist was.
Right.
So I actually did not get into the average of an instructional designer until I left that company and went to another company as an instructional designer. Because had I stayed with that original company, I probably would never have gotten to the point of, the median of that until years later, because just because of where I started and that initial jump would not have, it just wasn't high enough. And that's
Right.
why, there have been plenty of studies nowadays that the only real way to make real increases in salary is to jump to another company because of that. Because when you're going from position to position within companies, typically and usually, it's just a percentage increase. They're not
Right.
gonna, because it's an
There's a
internal
cap.
transfer.
A lot
Exactly.
of times there's a cap on how much of a percentage increase you can get moving into a new job. So you're absolutely right. A lot of times, if you want to make more money, you're going to have to move companies.
Yeah.
Now, I will say it's not, I will disagree with it's impossible, because the reason being, have you ever met someone who is perfectly fine and comfortable doing the role that they're doing and they have no desire to change that, or they enjoy being an expert in their field, and as long as they're
Have I met?
getting their
That's me.
yearly
Have I, like, that's where I'm at now? Have I? What you talking about? Have I met him?
right, but I mean, like, they're
That's where I'm at
okay
right now.
with the money that they make and just getting the minimum yearly increase,
Oh,
because they'll work for the same company for 20, 30 years. They're not striving to make more money per se. They're like, you know what, I'm comfortable where I'm at, and every year I get a 3% increase or a 5% increase or whatever that looks like. And so I would say, if you want to make more money, it's impossible
hmm.
to do that staying in the same company. But I totally get what you're saying, and I think that is probably 90% of the reasons people leave their jobs within 2-3 years. Well, maybe not the only reason. Sometimes, the
Yeah. I
environment
mean,
isn't great.
there's a ton of reasons
Yeah.
and there's article after article after article about why people leave. A lot of times it's, burnout or management or
Right.
whatever. But money surely has a lot to do with it.
Especially today, everything is so expensive. People can't afford to
Right.
buy houses. Like, we was just talking to my husband about this, about, thank goodness we are in the position we are, and we bought a house a few years ago right before everything blew up, because it's at this point people don't have the choice. They're jumping around because they need to. They got to survive. So,
You're absolutely right. Yeah. And
mhm.
I've said multiple times where I live. I live in the state of North Carolina, which is one of the cheaper states to live in, right? So,
Yep.
that's where I was born and raised, and I'm, for those not lucky enough to be born on, in the one of the cheapest states to live in. I used to work with uh, a woman that she was born in San Diego,
Mm.
uh, and she was 50 something. And she said in her late 30s, she just resigned herself to the fact that she's never going to own a house, which blew my mind. Like, I don't like,
Mhm.
and from years ago, I read an article that said generational wealth is built on owning a house. Um, and it's just one of those things where, how the typical American dream generational wealth is built on owning a house and leaving that house to your kids. And like, my job is to own this house, pay this house off, leave that house to my child so that so that she can either live here or sell this house and
Mhm.
use that money to buy another one. Like, that's how generational wealth typically is supposed to work. But if you never own a house to begin with, that doesn't work. but that, we're getting off topic, but you're absolutely right. Like, that's, if your goal is to continuously gain those big chunks in salary,
Yeah,
job hopping is the way to do that.
that's what you got to
And
do.
my thought is, I've never been in a spot to do it, the hiring and firing jobs. I've never been a people manager.
Right.
So, obviously I've done leadership training and things like that. And in those trainings, I have cautioned people around making judgments about, being negative about job hopping and things like that, primarily for those reasons, because I think there needs to be a shift around how that's looked at. I know that for a lot of older generations, there was a negative look
For
at
sure.
changing jobs every 2 to 3 to 4 years.
Yep.
Go
They've
ahead.
had to shift that mindset. HR, hiring
Mm-hmm.
managers, recruiters, they've had to shift that mindset. And I think the folks in those fields just know at this point, my sister is in recruiting, and so I talked to her about this, and um that's just not something that they look at anymore as a ding on a resume. If anything, it can look good if you are, moving up seniority wise every 2 or 3 years. That means you're a quick learner, you're mastering your role, and you're ready to move on to the next step. That's how it's being viewed more, I think, these days. um but
Right. I mean, that's how I look at it. But
yeah.
yeah, I think
Yep.
it's the same, to move on to the next one, I think the same with like gaps in your resume, right? Like, I view that kind of the same way. Like, I don't know, again, from a training point of view, as I'm developing like leadership training and recruiter training and things like that.
Right.
When I'm developing material, my thought process around gaps in a resume is, you don't know what was going on in that person's life, so don't assume. Like, that's typically what I would say is, don't assume that you know what's going on there. It could have been something deeply personal. It could have been some personal tragedy. You don't know what was going on there. Um, it could have
I
been that they won the lottery and took a vacation. You don't,
It
like,
doesn't matter, right? In my
exactly.
opinion, it doesn't matter. And when I had to Google this yesterday, actually, Jeremy, when we were talking about reasons why this looks bad. Because I'm like, why would an eight month, year long gap, like,
What'd you find? What did
that's
Google tell you?
that's that's pretty typical for mothers, who want to
It's a good
spend the
point.
first year with their new babies. I think that's completely
It's a good
reasonable.
point.
You don't forget everything that you learned prior to, having a child. Um, so what I found was it can make you seem like you're unreliable, or it was difficult to find a new job because you're not a good hire. And I'm just thinking, like, do you know how hard it is out there right now to find jobs? Like, all of these people that were laid off last year by these big companies,
Mm,
because the economy is so uncertain. People don't know what's happening. Companies don't know, like, are we going through a
that's
recession?
true.
Like, who knows, right? So we all know in the last year there's been massive layoffs at big companies. And there are plenty of very skilled, very intelligent, extremely, qualified people who have not been able to find jobs this year. So I just think that that's just a total unfair assumption, or a consideration as being negative on someone's resume. If I were in a recruiting role, I wouldn't question it. I would just think, wow, this person took some time off. Okay. Maybe they needed a mental break. Like, it's been a rough 10
That's
years,
true.
guys.
Right.
We've seen a lot of
Just the
things.
past. Yeah.
Just the
I would
last
say,
5 years.
just the past 3. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just the past 35
Right.
has been rough on everybody. Just,
Yeah.
yeah, you give everybody the benefit of the doubt. Let's just go. All right, so let's get one thing I wanted to bring up, because this is something that when I, in my first instructional design role, I didn't have to do this, thankfully, because there was, a merger going on. So I was kind of grandfathered in an instructional design role. But after all of that kind of settled down, we would interview new instructional designers. What we would do is give them a packet of information, and then they would actually have to put on a presentation. So it was an hour long interview, and then the first half hour is them kind of going over the information, and then they would give a 10-minute presentation, and then it was us critiquing slash interviewing that. And
Yep.
I look back on that now thinking that's awful. Like that is probably one of the worst. Like
And it's
thinking
so
about that
common.
now,
Every
and
it's so common. Companies make people do that a lot.
and thinking like then I'm thinking about it, and I was like, God, I'm so glad that I didn't have to do this. Just from a nervousness standpoint of I wasn't real confident in my skill set then. So that's kind of what I was thinking of. Man, this would be really difficult for me to do now because I was still very new in my career. But now I look back on it as, could I do it now? Yeah, absolutely. I could knock it out of the park. But man, I would be kind of agitated that I would have to do this because it's a little ridiculous. So I
See,
wanted to
I
bring that up as a
agree.
hot take of like doing the presentation and kind of putting you on the spot in the interview, because as far as I know, and I never applied and did the interview for that company or that team.
Oh, I can tell
So I
you
don't
all
know if
about
we
this
prepped
process.
them at all before they got there, or if we just kind of dropped it in their lap when they walked in the door. God, I hope we prepped them or something before they got there. But like if we gave them no prep or anything and just said, "Hey, guess what? You're giving us a presentation in like 30 minutes. Go." Like
So I've had to
that.
do this a couple times, Jeremy. I've had to do presentations for job interviews, and I was given sample data or a case study 3 or 4 days prior to the interview. So they give you time. But I'm torn on this because we've all seen people hired for jobs that they totally schmoozed themselves into or networked themselves into, and they can't attach an email or attach a document to an email. Like we've seen this. All right. So that's frustrating. Sometimes it's good to see what people can actually do, right? Actionable.
Yeah,
Um
so I'm less torn, and here's why. All jobs that I know of come with a 90-day evaluation period.
yeah, that's
Use the
fair.
90-day evaluation period as it's supposed to be used. I'm an instructional designer, right? If you're a facilitator, I get it,
Yeah.
right? Have them facilitate something. As an instructional designer, yes, we may need to step in and facilitate something. Yes, we have to like navigate calls with clients, things like that. But typically, in most roles, our primary duty is not to facilitate. We need to know facilitation practices. We need to know what works in a classroom. We need to know things like that, adult learning through things like that. But facilitation is not a prime role of our job. So
Yeah.
I don't see why, for an instructional designer, we were in the limited amount of time you have for an interview. Why am I asking you to facilitate?
Yeah, no. I don't know that that was the greatest like
Like that's when I
display
look
of their
back on it, that's my
abilities.
main question.
Yeah. No.
Because as an instructional designer at that place, we didn't facilitate. Maybe once a year when we did a T3, did we
Yeah.
facilitate?
That was it.
Maybe,
Yeah.
and that was it.
No, if companies are going to demand those types of things during interviews, it needs to be relevant to the job 100%. That's silly. And I just want to say too that I have been on the side of putting a presentation together, making it
Mm.
through 3 or 4 interviews with the, getting to the end and thinking, I think I've got a strong chance in this. Meanwhile, I've spent 10, 12 hours over the last couple of days perfecting this presentation only to get the thanks but no thanks email.
Oh yeah.
And so that is pretty defeating. And especially when there's no feedback or anything. And I know we could talk about that too, but I've got a friend, a previous colleague, who she said, you know what, after that happened to her, she said any other company that she interviewed with, if they were asking her to present, she would say, thank you, but no thank you. So she turned it around, and so maybe we'll have a movement and people will start, interviewees will get tired of that as well. But it's if you're going to test for something like, people's ability, it needs to be relevant to the job. But
I agree.
also, if you're
I
going to
can
make
see.
them jump through all of those hoops, at least give them feedback on why they were not given the job.
Yeah. When I like as an ID, a lot of times what I'm asked for is like a portfolio and things like that,
Right.
which
That makes sense.
I get it. And
Hard.
there's complications with that as well, because a lot of things that we make are for clients and
Correct.
they're
Can't share it.
proprietary. And it's like, okay, so now do I there are some things that I can share, some things I can't share. So now, like, if I were to want to go out and apply for things, like, okay, now do I just go make random stuff? Like, everything that I have made has been for a client that I can't share. Like, I've made stuff while I'm in the employment of somebody else. I can't share that stuff. Like, what do I what do I share at this point? Like, I don't even know what I would include that's not already branded for somebody else. So
I guess if you had to have it, you could always go back in. Of course, this is if you're a contractor and you own your own software and you can go in and edit it and kind of take away the branding. A lot of times when you're working for a company, you're not going to spend $1,000 for Articulate software. If you're a contractor, it's a little bit different, but yeah,
that's true. Okay, so let's move out of the interviewing and pre-onboarding and all that. Let's move out of that.
Okay.
I had an ID one on here. We're gonna skip that one. I think we've got some better ones because I don't think we're gonna. I think we got some better ones because I like some that you brought up to us yesterday, Sarah. So because I like this one, I've heard this one a lot. Failing fast. So a lot of companies have started to say this. They want to fail fast, and companies are saying it's okay to fail. We want you to fail because we're going to fail fast and we're going to learn from our mistakes.
Is
it? But is it really?
Sounds good.
I think, and we talked a little bit about this yesterday. I think it's okay for. I think the view from the company side is, hey, it's okay for the company to fail.
Right.
I think it's not okay for the individual to fail, because if the individual were to fail, I still think they're going to have you sign that document and that piece of paper, that coaching write-up or
right,
whatever that document is called in your particular company, that's going to go in your file. At most
it's
companies,
not going to look good.
Some companies, yeah,
it's going to be a fail on a write-up, and it's not going to look good. I agree. Yeah, I was thinking about this. Go ahead. I was thinking about this because, and what you said about, like, from a company perspective, it's okay to fail. And I think it sounds good because companies do this thing where if it fits the narrative of, like, resiliency, like, in the face of adversity, our company faced this year, and we, tested and implemented these things, and then we iterated, we failed, and we did it again, and we came out on top. And that's great, right? Like, that failure fits their narrative to tell a story of resiliency. But when it's on a personal level, on an employee level, you're absolutely right. I don't think that companies are ready for their people to fail and fail fast. And own it.
Exactly. Is it okay? And I think that's the key. Like, are you in an environment? And I'm glad to say that we are, because
yes.
we had a conversation on a project we're working together. It was Monday, right? Where we were having a conversation where I basically said to you, hey, Sarah, I think, I think we messed up here. Like, I think we made a mistake here. I think we
Yeah.
didn't post something that I think we didn't put something in the folder we should have put in, and there was a mistake on this project, and we owned it and we stepped up to it and we said, I think we missed something here, um,
It's
and we
fixable.
moved
We're
forward.
going to do that
Yeah, and it was
and move
fixable,
forward.
and we owned it, and we moved forward and we fixed the problem. And I think we're luckily be in a situation like that, but that was not. I've not always been in a situation where we could do that. I've
No,
been in multiple places to where you immediately go into what is the excuse I'm going to use to get
correct.
myself out of this situation, because in your
Yep.
head oh, I messed this up. Like, this is my fault, but how am I going to make it seem like this is not my fault so that I don't get written up? Because this one write up is going to affect my paycheck in like these different ways. And
Oh,
my
yeah.
already meager 3% raise is going to go down to 1.5%, or I'm going to lose whatever because I made one mistake in a 365-day period. Uh, so
Right. I think you can tell when you're in an environment and in a culture that is okay with failure because you will hear people own their mistakes more,
exactly.
right? And I have way more respect for the person who says, "You know what? I could have done this differently. I apologize. Let's try this again and let's work together." Like that right there is like, "Yes, thank you." Like nobody's perfect, right? Where everybody
Exactly.
makes mistakes. That's how you learn. But I think when companies, they say it sounds good, but in reality, failure is not perceived as okay. They are also less likely to own when something is messed up or when they've done something. And instead of correcting it, moving forward, working together to resolve it, we're either, sweeping it under the rug, pretending like it didn't happen and trying to just move forward when really that's not a good idea. Or we're repeating the same mistakes over and over again because nobody spoke
Nobody
up and
admit.
said, "Hey guys, we did that
Yeah.
wrong. Let's do it
Yeah.
differently." And so I think it's detrimental to the success of projects, to companies, to all kinds of things when you're not in an environment where like it's okay to fail fast, if you will. That corporate buzz terminology makes me
Corporate
giggle
buzz
when I hear it.
terminology. Yeah, and let's bring up another one because I like this one too. So, being a disruptor.
Yeah,
So there's this
he was a
term.
real
Oh my
disruptor.
god, this term. This. I've read so many things on. This is a big LinkedIn one.
Yeah, I know.
This is the LinkedIn term that
Don't
is
come
thrown
for
around
us
a
on this
lot.
one, you guys. I get it.
Okay, I will argue this. Come on, I don't care. You can
I
come for
know.
me with it. Being
Right.
a disruptor uh, on LinkedIn is viewed as a positive. It is.
Right.
Um, and I will admit there are some instances where things like that are needed. And we just mentioned it, when mistakes happen, there do need to be somebody that say, hey, this was a mistake. And it needs to be corrected, or there are some times where somebody needs to step in and say, this is an issue. However, it's not always viewed as a positive. It's not something that needs to happen in every meeting. It's not something that you always need to be. There doesn't always need to be one. There doesn't.
No.
If the meeting is going along fine and you're chugging along, you don't need to be that guy that or girl or person that says, hey, what about this? What about if
Right.
we, throw everything in the kitchen sink into this? What
Yeah.
about if we do something completely different than what we've been doing for the past 4 months and throw this entirely different scope change in here just to disrupt everything?
We're going to shake it up a little. That's what we're going to do. No, I totally agree. I have found that people, you have like very opposite ends of the spectrum, and there are people who are disruptors that are like truly innovative and willing to take feedback and criticism and be like, you know what, like there's two different opinions or many different opinions, different sides of the story. Let's talk it out. And then you've got the disruptors who are like, they're going to find any excuse they can to, like you said, we're in a meeting. There's no need. Like, sometimes if it ain't broke, it doesn't need to be fixed. But also that mindset can also get you in trouble too, as we know, doing things over and over again.
It's like everything, there's a positive and a negative, and there's a
Right.
time and a place.
Yes.
Like the time, like for, we'll use the learning project life cycle, right? The time to be a disruptor is in that analysis phase, right? Way early, before, pen is put to paper, for lack of a better term, before the prototype is built, before your final audio is in. If you're trying to be a disruptor in the final review, what are you doing?
Go away.
What do you like? Money's spent at that point, man. Like, you're not doing anything.
Well, now you're not being as a disruptor. You're being a pain in the ass, okay? And you're causing scope creep, and you're just, this information
too late
was
at that
helpful
point.
weeks ago. Yeah.
Yeah. Like if you're being a disruptor at that point, either like, hopefully that's the first call that you've been on. At that point, you shouldn't have been invited.
Right.
Or you haven't been paying attention, or, something like that. But, there's a time and a place. So the point is, don't be a disruptor just to disrupt something. Like, have a point and make it impactful to the point where it's positive. Don't be a disruptor just to throw a monkey wrench in something, just to be disruptive. I guess that's
And there's the other side of the whole, failing fast. Are companies really okay with that? Are companies really okay with disruptors?
That's a good point. So I'm going to say, for me, I've been in both. I feel like here, yes, I have been that guy here a couple of times. I've kind of been mad at them here, but I've been that person here a couple of times, early enough to where we've been able to kind of adjust. I am typically the one that will try to poke holes in things in the analysis and say, okay, well, my role typically when we do those analysis is to try to identify those risks before we get there. I'm usually the pessimist. It's unfortunately that's how my mind works. So
realistic person,
just how it works, right? So that's typically been my role. So that's, again, early enough to where it becomes a positive. But I have been in some meetings where I've been asked to leave in a couple because I've done that. I've been asked to leave the meetings. I will say that project crashed and burned for the exact reasons that I was bringing up in that meeting.
So that's what I'm talking about. Don't be the leader, who is drowning out the disruptor because it's inconvenient and because it ain't broke, so don't fix it. So that's the other side of it, right? Like, know when to be a disruptor and know when to be disrupted.
That was also the time when I feel like I grew as a person, because it took a lot for me to go, I told you so. It took a lot for me not to go back to him.
Not to say that.
So.
Mm-hmm. Jerk. There's that girl, that chick on TikTok who provides like ways to say things in a corporate way. You know what I'm talking about? Like, how do you say, I sent that in an email already? Or like, she's got some really great ideas. I wish I could credit her. But anyway.
All right. So we're coming close to the end time. We got one more because I wanted to talk about this one because we are at Lumius. We are fully remote. We are work from home 100%. As you guys probably can see from my background, this is not a digital background. These are actually my bookshelves and my Captain America shield. We are 100% remote. We are 100% work from home. COVID changed the workforce a good bit. A lot of people that were not previously work from home, they went fully remote. They went work from home. Now that those things are kind of calming down, there's been a lot of articles and a lot of things talking about either returning to a hybrid workforce or returning fully into the workspace or returning back to an office. So there's been a lot of articles coming out hosted on LinkedIn or whatever different kind of articles that you're reading, be it the Times, the Post, whatever you do like to read, talking about the differences between work from home versus hybrid versus returning to office. Most of these that I've seen are talking about the negatives of working from home. So what I have started to do, I love working from home. I really do. Before Lumius, I had primarily been hybrid. Now, before becoming an instructional designer, I was always, quote unquote, in the office. I was either driving around in a truck, working in other people's homes, or I was full in the office. But I was hybrid for a while. I was 3 days in the office, 2 days at home. Now I am fully remote. I do love being fully remote. Like I said before, I love my work-life balance. But what I've started doing is clicking on the authors and just doing some cursory research on the authors of, if I've kind of judged for myself that these articles are really just bashing work from home from what I see are kind of superficial reasons, I'll do just cursory research on the author. And one of them was just really, really negative on work from home, basically saying that it's bad for your health, that it is, bad for work ethic, that you don't get enough done, which for me is kind of opposite of my personal experience. Again, this is my personal experience. Your experience may differ, but for me, it's, I get more done working from home than I do working in the office. My health is better because, I'm able to do things that I need to do. I'm able to kind of get up and walk around my neighborhood, and I can do stuff like that. Getting some exercise when I work from home, things like that. But again, that's my personal experience. So I decided to kind of do my own research and look up this author to kind of figure out what his credentials were. Turned out that he was kind of a major shareholder in a corporate real estate agency. And it kind of leaned into kind of his bias in writing the article. So it kind of made me think the hot take here was what are the reasons behind some of the articles between working from home versus the hybrid model versus fully returning to office? Because I think now that COVID is, knock on wood, hopefully on the way out, I know it's, turning into seasonal and things like that and may come back to bite us and all that. But so I kind of wanted to bring that up because we're fully remote. But I know some people are returning to hybrid or returning full to office. Personally, I don't have a whole lot of negative experiences working remote. Sarah, what about you?
This is a good conversation for you and I, because we are very different in the way that you are a true introvert and I am more of an extrovert. So it was a transition for me.
You are a people person, and I know this. I don't know if this comes through since I host a podcast. This is strange. I don't know if it comes through on the podcast, but guys, I am 100% introvert.
Yes.
I could be happy not talking to anybody all day long and be perfectly happy.
And I think for the introverts of the world, working from home is fantastic. It doesn't change their productivity. It if anything, it helps. It's less anxiety having to be in a room full of people. It's just much more comfortable for them. And I just think for me as an extrovert, it was an adjustment. I personally would not hate a hybrid situation. If I were working from home and then going into an office once or twice a week, or I had the freedom to do so if I wanted it, I would totally do it. But I do think that the companies that are calling people back in to the office full time are doing it mostly for the wrong reasons. And it usually comes down to the real estate, right? Whether they've signed a 7-year lease and there's been 2 years because of COVID that, it's been unoccupied. So everyone's got to come back into the office. We're going to prioritize the money that we spent here over everyone's, preferences. And Adam Grant, somebody I follow on LinkedIn, who's amazing. He's a great best-selling author. He published something a couple months ago that really spoke to me, and it was, to all the companies calling people back to the office full time, don't mistake presence for performance. Showing up is not a sign of commitment. It's an act of compliance. And so just,
Like that.
it makes a ton of sense, right? Like, of course people are going to do it if they have to. But that's not where people are comfortable, a lot of them. And it's not where they're most productive either. For me as an extrovert, I can tell you 100% I get more work done working from home because I have less distractions. I have less people to talk to. Like, I'm sure you could probably talk to some folks that I used to work with in an office, and they could probably share that, I was a talker, so and I get that, like, need met also, though, having face-to-face conversations with people when I need it, like, even if it's virtual, and of course, just if it's important to me, I make sure I make time to be social after work or before work or whatever that looks like. So at least I have the option, and so for the people that are being kind of forced into this, I think it sucks. I think it stinks. I think that, if there's a reason that is truly a valid reason to have everybody back in the office, because, I think most of that, like, were essential workers, even during the pandemic. But for everybody else where they could work remotely, if what are you afraid of, right? Like, collaboration, is that the problem? Like, there's so many ways to overcome that. You don't have to be in person. So I just kind of feel like
Yeah.
if you're doing it for kind of so selfish reasons, not a fan,
Yeah. When I think again, and we've touched on this in many different episodes, 2020 changed the workforce in so many different ways,
Yeah.
with COVID in one of those big ways, showing us that these jobs don't need a central location to operate. Like,
No.
it showed us that we could all work remotely and still be productive at the same level, or even better than the same level than we were
Yep.
previously. And I think some people took the wrong lesson from that. I think they were slightly threatened by that. At the time, I was not with Lumius at the time in 2020. But, I was working for somebody that was fully against remote work. We were fully in the office 5 days a week when COVID hit. And, he was a great manager. He was a really nice guy. He was kind of old school. But he kind of rolled with the punches, and he kind of went with it and went with the remote thing, and got used to it. And by the end of it, by 9 months into it, he had actually hired somebody across the country to be a fully remote employee because he realized the change in it,
Right.
that we didn't need to be there. Right. So he
The
actually adapted
possibilities
to
it opens
right,
up.
right. So, but I think a lot of people took the wrong lesson of, okay, I just need to wait for this to be over, and then I can reassert and bring everybody back in. So
Yep.
I don't know if it's like trying to put toothpaste back into the tube, right? I don't know if it's that easy.
I think there's resentfulness for sure. And I know people that are specifically looking for remote roles now that their companies have made them come back into the office. So they're going to lose really great talent because of that. And then they are closing off their stream of good talent by also not opening up job roles remotely, especially when you're looking for like such a niche kind of, experience, or somebody with very specific experience. Like, what do? It's going to make it exponentially harder to fill those roles. I just feel like, recruiters, their lives were probably much easier for those, whatever that year, maybe 2 years, where they could open up their
Yeah. Well,
pool
yeah.
of
I mean, your recruiting pool goes from like your city. So, I
yeah,
mean, obviously, I'm making these numbers up because
an hour
who knows,
radius
but
or
your
whatever.
city of like, 50 applicants or however many to the country or the world, or maybe even, all right, maybe your time zone. Like maybe you're just looking at
Right.
your time zone. So you've
Still
got hundreds of applicants, or the
huge.
country, which is, even more hundreds of applicants, or whatever. Which, I mean, your applicant pool just gets massive with this talent. Um, so, but
Yep.
could not get through the hot take episode without bringing up work from home, because I feel like that's something that I don't see it
It's a
going
hot
away
topic.
anytime soon. Because yeah, I still see companies listing, stuff for on site that could easily be remote. Like it's crazy to me how many things are listing full on site things that could easily be remote. I've got a friend of mine that he was just recently told that they're going to bring him back fully in the office 5 days a week when he's been remote for 4 years now.
Yeah.
So what's he
No,
doing?
that
He's looking for a new job.
looking for yeah, 100%.
Uh,
Yeah. Yeah, it is a hot topic, and I don't think it's not resting. You know what I mean? Like we're not just bringing people into the office back in. I think this topic is not over. I think you're going to see a lot of people looking for remote jobs, leaving their offices or jobs where they're required to come in, or purposefully not being as productive, or maybe not even purposely not being productive. Like I said, just myself, like inadvertently, I'm way more productive working from home because I have less, things to take my attention. They used to call me squirrel at my office, okay? Because that's how quickly I was diverted my
yeah.
attention. So,
Well, and
we'll see.
we'll end on this, and I'll say this: like I intentionally do things at my house to ensure that I stay focused on work. So
Exactly. So do I.
I'm a huge nerd. I'm a huge gamer. So my game systems, my gaming laptop, things like that, they're unplugged, they're disconnected. Like what I do
Right.
is I tell myself I put a 2 minute obstacle between myself and the other things I want to do. So I would have to spend 2 minutes to reconnect to those things, so that it makes me not want to do those things. So
Yes.
I unplug, unhook everything that would take me away from my work stuff, so that I intentionally don't do those things. If I were to go into the office, yes, those things aren't there, but there are other distractions there. Exactly like you said, like in a big office, usually there are incentives there, right? Like there's stuff to walk to do. So
Oh
if
yeah.
I'm working on something heads down or whatever, right? Hey, I'm going to go to the cafeteria or something that's more than likely there. I'm going to grab a snack. I'm going to grab something to eat, or I'm going to go get a drink. I'm just going to walk around. I'm going to go talk to, Alex, John, Kevin, who's right
Yeah.
down here. I need to ask him something anyway. Whereas if I'm sitting at my desk remotely, I don't have that option. I would probably just shoot him an email and then keep working on something else that I'm doing while I'm waiting on him to respond to the email.
Yeah.
I'm more productive remotely than I would be if I were in the office, right? So
I also just want to say this before we end too, on that note, is if an employee is getting the work done and they're doing a good job and they're showing up to
what does it matter?
meetings, why does it matter? Maybe I do want to watch
Fantastic.
TV. Maybe I do want to watch TV for 2 hours today. But guess what?
Point.
I'm going to wake up at 5 a.m. because I can't sleep because my dog is sleeping on top of me. And I'm going to be like, you know what? I'm going to get up and go work for a couple hours because I need to get this done. So that's my point. Like, if your employee is getting the work done and they have a reasonable workload and they're doing a good job, then what does it matter? They're showing up.
Leave them alone. That is a fantastic point to end on. If your employees are getting their work done, leave them alone.
Leave them alone.
Just leave them alone. That is not a hot take. That is just what you need to do, guys.
We're going to start that movement, guys. Leave them alone.
If they're getting their work done and it's up to the quality you need, just leave them alone. I appreciate everybody tuning in. We'll see you next time. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good day.